Hi, and welcome to the first show of 1994 on Cause You Like Sports. I'm Randy Cosgrove, and we wish you nothing but the best in this new year, 1994. We hope that it brings you lots of happiness and prosperity and good health. Our program today, I think, is going to be a very good one for you. A guy that deserves to have a lot of accolades come his way and is now in the spotlight because he's just been named the small school, high school football coach of the year, which includes AA and Class A, and that is, of course, West Allegheny's Terry George. And Terry, I want to thank you very much for coming out and joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real privilege to have you here, and certainly a great honor that you've recently been bestowed, and I know that it took a lot of hard work for you to be able to achieve that goal.
A lot of hard work, 4 years of it, matter of fact, and a great working effort from my cast, my staff, and the administration at West Allegheny. But we made it.
All right, we're going to talk to Terry about his great season of 1993, the historic Cinderella ride that West Allegheny had, making the playoffs for the very first time in the school's history. Before we do that, let's recap a little bit what's transpired since our last program. Of course, New Year's Day has come and gone, and a lot of sports news has hit the wires, and of course, most recently, we can talk about it with Terry as well. The Steelers' season of 1993, while they finished on a high note, beating Cleveland 16-9 at the stadium on Sunday, and they have now qualified for the NFL playoffs. New England beating Miami was one thing the Steelers needed to help them out. They also needed either a loss by the Jets against Houston or a loss by the Raiders against Denver. It looked like they were going to get that against in the Raiders-Denver game when Denver led for most of the way, but a great comeback by the Raiders, winning in overtime 33-30. And then they had to wait till Sunday night, Houston shutting out the New York Jets 24-0 at the Astrodome. And Terry, a lot of people said that the NFL was becoming boring this year and over the last couple of years, but I tell you what, the final Sunday of the season was anything but boring.
Especially for us here.
That's right.
It's exciting to see that what had to take place for us to get an opportunity, maybe get in that Super Bowl.
Well, Super Bowl is a long way away, but that's the goal. He talks just like a coach. You want to get to that ball at the end of the string. But Greg Lloyd had some interesting things to say at halftime, and I'm sure everyone has read and heard about those comments, and we'll talk to Coach George about that, how a player can affect the team from that standpoint. But the Steelers now will open the playoffs against Kansas City on Saturday at Arrowhead Stadium. They'll go against the legendary Joe Montana. They'll kick it off at 12:30. Of course, the other game on Saturday, Green Bay and Detroit. On Sunday, Minnesota will take on the New York Giants in New York, actually in New Jersey at the Meadowlands, and Denver returns to the L.A. Coliseum to take on the Raiders. Dallas, San Francisco, Buffalo, and Houston will have byes this first weekend of the NFL playoffs. In college football, bowl day has come and gone, and the feast, the buffet of bowl games on the menu, presented some outstanding football games, and Florida State ends up the #1 team in the country on both the AP and the coaches poll. Notre Dame is second, and Terry, from a coach's standpoint, Notre Dame beats Florida State. They each end up with one loss. How does a team who lost to the other team end up the national champion?
Apparently in the collegiate ball, you can't lose at the end of the season. That seems like with the pressure that Notre Dame's had put on it was the loss with Boston College. And at the same time, you turn around and watch Boston College beat up on Virginia. I mean, I don't know how much merit that really carries. I anticipated there to be two co-champions.
I think that would have been the fairest thing, if nothing else, to have co-champions. But what a great year to say, let's have a college playoff.
This is definitely, I think, what we need. It seems like everywhere else, they have that, and this was definitely a year for it. It would have been nice to even see Notre Dame play West Virginia somehow to answer some of those questions. But Florida State, Notre Dame, I watched that game, and that was a great college football game.
Sure was.
Florida State showed a lot of heart in trying to come back, and I think that may have had a little play in it. Some of the turnovers that Florida State had in the beginning of the game, and still be able to overcome some of that adversity that they did have in the beginning of the game. But you can't argue with Lou Holtz.
No, can't argue with him.
So.
I think part of the problem, and I had a long talk on Sunday at the Steeler game during the pregame festivities in the press lounge with Bino Cook, who is kind of like the guru of college football. And he said that a lot of coaches and media don't like Lou Holtz, and therefore, unless it's a flat-out obvious situation, they're not going to vote for Notre Dame.
You know, I like Lou Holtz and I like Bobby Bowden, and if I could be like 1/4 of the coach they've ever, what they've achieved.
A lot of people very glad for Bobby Bowden to finally win a national championship.
And I think he accepted it well, too. I mean, he comes back and tries to make the general public understand how Lou Holtz does feel with his comments. So you get to give an individual a lot of respect, you know, for handling it.
In the coaches poll, Florida State 1, Notre Dame, Nebraska 3, Florida, Wisconsin. What a great job by Barry Alvarez out of Burgettstown up at Wisconsin. West Virginia finished at 6th. Penn State, after the great win over Tennessee, is 7. Texas A&M 8. Arizona 9. Ohio State is 10. In the AP Associated Press poll, exactly the same, except Auburn is in at number 4. They're not allowed to be in the coaches poll because they're on probation, and then the rest of the teams follow suit the same way in the AP poll. Interesting that maybe the best team in the country this year was Auburn, and Terry Bowden, Bobby Bowden's son, was the coach at Auburn, so they kind of shared the championship in their own family.
That must have been a pretty good Christmas dinner that they had. I kind of watched the interview this morning between father and son on, I think it was Good Morning America, had it on, and how he kept on asking Terry Bowden, you know, how he felt about it, and I was hoping that maybe he would say, "Dad, I'd like to take a shot at you."
Yeah, let's line up and play.
But I'm remarkable, you know, in his first season, he won 10-0. It's too bad they couldn't take advantage of it. So I think relatively they're young. So he feels that he can bring that team back around next year.
I think they're the answer to a great trivia question down the road, because it probably will never happen again. But the question would be, what father and son coaching team won more games in 1 year than anybody else? And you think about it, Florida State ended up 11-1, Auburn 11-0. That's 22-1. I don't think Don and David Shulett will ever get that many wins in one season combined.
Not at the rate they're going right now.
All right, turning over to Penguin hockey for just a moment. The Pens are 0-3-1 in their last 4 games through Sunday. Of course, we tape the show on Mondays every week, and after losing 7-2 at Hartford on Sunday, as I mentioned, they're 0-3-1 in their last 4 games. On Monday, they played at Ottawa, and then on Friday, they'll be at Buffalo, coming back home on Saturday to take on Calgary. Robert Morris, well, they finished their 8-game road trip through hell at 2-6. We talked about it a little bit last week. They did not have a home game in December. They finally come home. They'll play their Northeast Conference schedule beginning Tuesday night. They were hosting Wagner. Thursday, Monmouth comes to the Sewell Center, and then on Saturday they travel to Mount St. Mary's. And yes, they did survive that 400-mile, actually 800-mile round-trip bus ride that they took to Cincinnati and Kentucky. It's unbelievable to me that a Division I basketball program, that their athletic director, getting $50,000 in guarantees, would put a basketball team on a bus for an 800-mile round trip. Jared Dorm, I don't know how you do it, buddy, but keep up the good work. Sooner or later, you're going to get the chance to do your own scheduling and make your own decisions on travel plans. All right, Pitt at Syracuse on Saturday. Duquesne will host Rhode Island tonight in the Atlantic 10. And on Saturday, UMass comes calling to the Palumbo Center to take on the Dukes, and they are coached, of course, by John Calipari, the former Moon High School standout, now one of the top coaches in college basketball. Back to talking to Terry George about his great season out at West Allegheny. The Indians of West A having the best season ever in their history, making the playoffs for the first time. You've been there 5 years now, Terry, and if you could go back 5 years when you took over the job there and looking at what had to be done to make that program not only a contender, but initially just to make them competitive. What did you think had to be done 5 years ago?
Well, you know, I think the first thing was not telling anybody in 5 years you'd be playing you know, for a WPIL championship. We never looked at it as, you know, saying that, hey, this is what we wanted to do. You know, we looked at the program in general and said, this is what we have to do at the beginning. The first thing was, you know, to get the kids to believe they could win. And you do that through a number of things. In my first year coming in, we uniformed them properly. We felt that we put them in a classy outfit, try to make them feel as good as any other team in the conference that they were playing at.
You know, it's funny you bring that up because I had a long talk this summer with Johnny Majors prior to Pitt opening training camp. And that had long been a philosophy of his. No matter where he coached at, the first thing that he did when he went into that school, regardless of what was there before, was to get a new set of uniforms, the best that he could possibly get. It may not seem important, but I think you just hit upon it. Those kids need to feel like they're important and that the school and the program cares about them, and you want them to feel good with what they wear. So it's interesting that you point that out.
Well, they say, you know, you work the way you're dressed sometimes, and the thing that we wanted to do was give them a uniform that had meaning to it. When I first came in, there must have been 7 different Indians, and there really was truly not a symbol or an emblem. When I was at Cardington, we had our cougar paw, and that meant a lot to us as an individual spiritual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought in the, we don't want to say Florida State arrowhead, but it's pretty close to it. And that means a lot to us. It means we gave ourselves a little title called the Tribe, and it's like that's our spirit, that's our life. Anytime we say tribe, it's what other people talk about when they say pride, and it has a lot of little meanings that keep us going as one. The stadium, when I first came in, was in pretty bad shape. The parent group has been sensational. We had a paint the fence, paint the stadium day, where we had a lot of support in that first year.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant a lot, because it always gave us something to come back and tell the kids, hey, look, these people think you're important. They're supporting you. These are grown-ups coming out here. And that had a lot to do with our first year in building that program. The other thing was play the game. And we weren't worried about wins and losses. We wanted to be respected, because the year prior to that, the scores were like 35-42 zip. And there were some problems that they were having at that time. So our first thing was just to be solid, be sound, you know, make people respect you for the way you play the game. And we did that. And we ended up 3-7, lost some real close games, 4 games by 9 points or less. And we gained some respect in the conference. It was the first time we'd ever beaten Canavan and South Park at the same time. So, you know, we achieved what we wanted to achieve in the first year. And in the second year, it just snowballed. And it was a good thing that snowballed, that the kids believed in themselves, and we actually competed for a spot in the playoffs that year. We ended up 6-3-1. And then the third year, we ended up 6-4. And again, came down to the Washington game when we played them, and it was a great football game. The year before, prior, they beat us on a halfback pass, and this time we stopped their ISO play all day, and they caught us one time, and the kid who had the longest run, Malone at that time, on us, and it kind of put the nail in the coffin as far as making a statement that year, other than having a winning season. And then last year, fourth year, was probably the most important year as far as turning this program around, because we had just come off a back-to-back winning season. We felt we had a good team that could compete for the conference championship or 1 or 2 spots. We were young, and the only thing that could beat us was injuries, and that happened. We ended up having 12 serious injuries last year. 5 of them were starters, and we ended up 1 game under 500. So,
And of course, you're talking about 92.
yes, and this 93. I think 92 had a big effect on it. You know,
All those young kids were a year along in the program, and some of the injured
right.
kids got healthy, and it kind of climaxed.
Right, and they also knew that they could compete. You know, we finally got them to believe that they could compete, and they watched. This group of kids had watched prior kids. You know, the Vidmars and the Nishnits, the kids that played real strong for us in the past, knock off teams like Aliquippa, Stowe Rocks. These are teams that were undefeated, and that had a lot for character building. These kids witnessed that as young players, and it always gave us food to push back in their mouths and say, hey, you could do this, you know. And this group had a lot of character, a lot of heart. I just heard, I don't know if it was Bino Cook, maybe was talking about Cincinnati and the upcoming draft now that they have the #1 pick.
Right.
And they said he don't really care what they pick. You can't pick heart. And this group of kids had a lot of heart. We were undersized a lot of times in our championship play, and these kids overcome. It never was a factor.
I think in your situation, it's very similar to a few years ago over at Hopewell. I remember talking to Ralph Weitz at length one time about that situation, and they had never made the playoffs either. And there had been a couple of years where they were so close. And the year they did make the playoffs for the first time, they had kids that had played as sophomores and juniors, and they were close, and they kind of said before the season, this is it. We're going to be the group that takes this school to the playoffs for the first time. Was it a similar situation with your kids before the season? Had they set a goal, and were they determined to make it, that this was the group that was going to get them there?
Yeah, I think that was definitely one of their goals. It was a very positive group. We knew what we had to overcome coming into the season, and it was offensive line. And our quarterback and our backs and our receivers were very supportive to our young kids that were going to play in that line as far as experience-wise. This group they're winners. These kids are definitely winners. They've been winners in youth baseball, youth football. So they've always had that in the back of their minds that they could win. Even up to the Washington game when we ended up losing in overtime, 17-14, they were shocked they got beat. And that's great. I mean, you don't want to lose, but at the same time, you want kids to realize that they truly believed they could not be beat. And when it does happen, make it have an effect on the rest of their lives. And I think that has helped. I mean, they just truly believe in themselves and each other.
We're talking with Terry George, the head football coach at West Allegheny High School. His school making the playoffs for the very first time in its history. They had a great season this year, as Terry mentioned, losing in the semifinals to Washington in overtime. It was a great football game. And for the phenomenal season that he and his team had, he has recently been named the Small School Coach of the Year in Pennsylvania. That encompasses A and AA schools in the state. Terry, we're going to talk a little bit about your ball club and some of the kids that really made you go. And I guess we got to start at the top of the list. And you're a fine quarterback and you're a fine running back. Tony Cherico, the quarterback, and Brian Cornell, the running back. Sure, there's got to be 22 or 30 kids that make everything go, but usually there's one or two kids that are the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak. And talk a little bit about Cherico and Cornell.
Tony was our quarterback last year, and as a young quarterback made a lot of mistakes in our type of offense. We're a one-back team that puts people everywhere on the field, and he has to learn how to read blitz coverages and stuff like that, secondary coverages, and he had some problems last year. And then with the offensive line falling apart due to injury, I was concerned about his health. It didn't make it for a real good position to have some young kid back here trying to throw the football and run the option. And that year made him mature real quickly, and he worked throughout the summer on his arm strength. He's about 6'1", 6'2", roughly 180 pounds. Superb athlete. He's a very good athlete, and he's very intelligent. And that's the kind of kid we needed to run our offense. Tony's a born leader. There's no doubt about it. I mean, this kid, there's just no stopping him. I've gone in the huddle and asked him a question, and he would give me the right answer, on as far as play selection, what he truly felt. Tony did probably from the line about 40% audible due to defensive structures that we've faced, because we got a lot of different looks with our offense. And Tony made some great decisions this year as far as making the call at the line. So I can't speak highly enough about the kid for the simple reason that he's my extension out there on the field verbally, and he did a great job of controlling what we did have.
I see a trend from coaches allowing quarterbacks in high school now to make more decisions and be more involved in the decision-making process. And maybe that comes along with the run-and-shoot type offenses that are now becoming more prevalent in high school, the one-back set offenses. I know talking to Jack McCurry at length, he told me that his quarterback, Eric Kasparovich, probably audibled 50 to 60% of the times this year because he was intelligent enough and smart enough and had the responsibility to make those calls. And I know the guy at Penn Trafford, John Yacina, does the same thing with his quarterbacks. So I'm glad to see that coaches are allowing quarterbacks to have more involvement.
Well, it's a thing of faith, and if a kid puts I have a lot of faith in Tony. I have a lot of faith in Brad Morris, who's going to be our QB next year probably. If they put the time in, there's no reason why not to let them control it if they know what they're doing. I mean, they'll make sound decisions if you give them the opportunity to make. They'll make bad ones, but so do we.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that. You can't be finger pointing your quarterback or bad talking him when he does make a bad decision. You live with it.
I think it hurts the game of football, especially at the pro level sometimes, when so much of the decision-making process is left up to the coaches, and sometimes they overanalyze things, and just let the quarterback call the plays in the huddle. He's got a feel for the game, and I guess Bradshaw was one of the last quarterbacks in pro football that had pretty much free reign to call his own plays. I wish they'd go back to that.
Well, I'll tell you what, when we get down inside the 10, I'll go into the huddle. If there's a timeout offensively, if we call it, and defensively, if he calls it. And the first people I'll ask is not the QB. It's usually our linemen. And I've had our linemen, we have a great communication system at West Allegheny, and I believe in our kids, and I think they know that. And they don't lie to me when it comes to decision making.
Mm-hmm.
They realize that we're putting something on the line. I want their honest opinion. And I've had linemen say, Coach, don't come my way. I can't handle an individual or whatever. At the same time, I've had them tell me, hey, Coach, I can handle this, and
Yeah.
we'll go with it. So usually the first people, people we talk to when we go in is not so much Tony. It's our linemen. And I'll tell you, we played Canada a couple years, and a kid by the name of Jason Mazenko felt that we could run the option outside his hole, and we did. And it was a great call by Jason. And he happened to be one of our guards at that time. So it's definitely a team thing here, with our offense. And even with our defense, sometimes if we have a certain defense call and they don't feel comfortable in that, they'll let us know. And they do it the right way. That's the key.
All right, as far as moving on to college and playing college football, what schools is Tony Cherico interested in? Because I'm sure there's got to be a list of schools that are interested in him.
Yeah, at this time there's a lot of Division III schools, of course. We are looking forward to him to be taking a visit up to Toledo, University of Toledo, Ohio University, possibly Youngstown State. A lot of teams from the Yankee Conference over that way with Villanova and James Madison. We're pursuing those angles, like that, possibly Marshall. There hasn't been any Division I interest yet, and he lacks some of the tools, that they're looking for right now as far as strength.
Right.
Being able to throw that ball 60 yards downfield.
Well, there'd be nothing wrong with Youngstown State or Marshall. They've kind of hooked up and played for the 1AA championship a couple of times. That's top quality football.
Well, we'd be very proud of him if he was able to achieve that. That's what he wants to do. He wants to go somewhere, and of course, the kid's very intelligent. He first wants to get an education, of course, and at least that's what he tells me. And the other thing is to play somewhere on a quality program. So I think he'll achieve whatever he wants. That's the type of individual he is.
Talk a little bit about your outstanding running back, Brian Cornell.
Well, I don't know where to start with Brian. Brian is Mr. Everything in our offense. We throw a lot to him. He has to read blitz coverages a lot. He's a very intelligent player also. He's an instinct. The kid was born with football instincts. He makes things happen. I've seen him get in situations where, I was sweating, and all of a sudden he'd get out of it some way. Unbelievable as far as catching the ball. His running ability had proven itself he had one game over 200 yards this year against Stowe Rocks, and that was in 3 quarters. His unbelievable hands. He can catch the football. He's being recruited by pretty much the same thing that Tony is. Pitt has asked for a film from him, and we sent the film out, and we're waiting to hear what they want to do with him. Probably at the college level, depending on where he would decide to give it a shot. If he would probably go somewhere larger, he probably may have to go as a defensive back, where he was named All-State this year.
Right.
And there's no doubt. This kid hits with a ton of bricks. We have a couple of defenses that we had put in just for Brian, where instead of having just 2 linebackers in the middle, we actually had a third linebacker, and Brian coming up from the free safety spot. And a lot of kids you couldn't do that with, but Brian, he was going to jaw you pretty good. So we wanted to get him into the contact a little bit. And then this last year we made him an outside linebacker, which is like a strong safety in a 50 defense. And he responded. He was a little shaky at the beginning because he wants to have football, and he thought he could get the football at safety, but he ended up having 7 interceptions this year and broke the high school record there. And he returned 2 of them for interceptions. So he had an outstanding year, and we're definitely going to miss Brian. Like a lot of other individuals we're going to miss, but Brian's kind of not so much the heart, but the blood that flows through that thing. He'd get people speaking up. We had talked about Greg Lloyd a little bit, and Brian may be 180 pounds and 5'10", but he's going to talk like 240, and people are going to listen to him. So he's a kid that can definitely have an impact on someone's program.
Sounds to me like a kid that my high school football coach would always say, doesn't matter how big you are, even if you're 150 pounds, just be 150 pounds of rolling hell, and we'll be fine. That sounds the kind of kid that Cornell is.
No doubt about it. I call him my little bulldog, man, because I tell you what, if I was in a fight, he'd be one kid I want beside me. He's a scrapper.
How about a couple of other of your kids that you won't be welcoming back to training camp next year? Other seniors who did great jobs for you this year.
Well, Kevin Coates, this year he was third team middle linebacker at All-State. Kevin's the heart of our defense. He was our middle linebacker, led our team in tackles this year, and he's like Tony. He has a lot to say about what we run on the defensive side of the ball on the field, and he has the ability to change it. We've given that power. If for some reason something would come in the wrong way, he can take complete control of that defense. So, we're losing two quarterbacks, in essence, one on offense and one on defense. Kevin's also a great team leader. The kid, he's not very tall. He's about 5'10", and he came in last year at 235 in 1992, and we were hurting for defensive linemen, and we told him that if he probably didn't lose some weight, that we're probably going to have to play him at the down tackle. And I made a deal with him that if he'd come in at 205, we'd leave him alone. Well, he came in at about 200, 195, 200, and he played an unbelievable year this year in leading our defense from tackle to tackle. Did a great job on our special teams, which is hard sometimes for a kid that has that kind of status, being a defensive team leader. Blocked a couple punts this year. That were turnarounds in games, and we're definitely going to miss Kevin. Kevin's being recruited by a lot of Division III schools. This young man has 1,200 on his SATs scores, and he probably could be accepted anywhere as far as academics and athletics.
That's great.
So we're definitely going to miss him. Kevin Mazenko was a defensive back for us and one of our leading receivers this year. Kevin just would catch everything in arm's length. I mean, he'd get it somehow. And he was fighting Brian for the team interception thing. Actually, he broke the old record, too. And he ended up with 6, and Brian ended up with 7, so Brian has the record now. But Kevin's a two-way all-conference player that we're definitely going to miss. Steve Kabai and Jason Sargis, both of our defensive ends, and Jason being the offensive guard also, we're definitely going to miss those guys. We have a kid by the name of Glenn Wanji who played first-year middle linebacker for us this year. He's one of those kids that are on that bubble as far as graduation and when you start school. And this kid just had an outstanding year for us in the middle at linebacker with Kevin, and also in offense. He played a little bit of one back, a little fullback for us, and was primary receiver. He's going to graduate at 17 years old, and we're trying to find a way to get him to stay one more year, but I don't think the WPI or the PIA is going to let that happen.
No red shirt rules.
That's true. But those are the kids that primarily we'll be missing with the graduation. And Steve Kabai had over 10 sacks this year at defensive end, and he's an all-conference player this past year. And he's our character on our team. We call him Spider-Man, and every time he'd get a sack, he'd web you up. So we're definitely going to miss Steve, too.
Yeah. Well, you're losing some great kids, I'm sure, but the foundation has now been set, and the 3 or 4 years that you've had since that first year have kind of set the tone. And whether or not you make the playoffs in the next couple of years, I think now looks like West Allegheny finally has football tradition, and you're responsible for that.
Well, thank you. It comes to a lot of, the weight's carrying a lot of people. The hardest job right now is maintaining it. It wasn't so much getting here. That was fun. I think the hard work's going to be maintaining what we've created at this point, and that's where the work really gets down to getting into the nitty-gritty and keep it going from year to year.
We're rapidly running out of time, but I would assume that part of all this also was a commitment from the school board and the administration at West Allegheny to get the job done.
No doubt about it. We've had great support from everybody there. Probably the strongest thing that we've had is from our football boosters. We have a great group of people there that get us the things we need to compete at some of the other levels, the teams that we're playing at the Washingtons and the Canavans. And money's always a factor, and these people just have been unbelievable with their time, and generating that kind of capital that we need.
Well, that's great. Terry George has been my guest, the head football coach at West Allegheny High School. West Allegheny, the Indians making the playoffs for the first time in the school history, going all the way to the semifinals of the WPIL playoffs, and to lose a great game in overtime to Washington. Who knows? They might have been the team to go to True River Stadium, but that'll be left for another year. Terry George also named the Coach of the Year in the state of Pennsylvania for the small schools Class AA and Class A. Terry, thank you very much for coming out and joining me, and best of luck next year.
Thank you.
Appreciated having you on. All right, that'll do it for this week on Cause You Like Sports. The Steelers and the KC Chiefs on Saturday, 12:30 kickoff. Go out on a limb. Steelers 24, Joe Montana and the Chiefs 17. You agree?
I like to see that happen. Man. Magic Joe, somehow he'll get over.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
See you next week on Cause You Like Sports.